Okay, let's set a scene. You have finally found it. The one.
Mm.
It's the house you've been doom scrolling on real estate apps for months trying to find. It has that, that specific bay window you've been dreaming about where you're going to sit and drink your coffee.
The perfect spot.
The perfect spot. The backyard is actually big enough for that vegetable garden you keep threatening to start. And the school district. It's solid gold.
The trifecta.
It is. And you've gone through the absolute emotional ringer of the bidding war. You offered way, way over asking. You sweated through the night. You checked your email, 400 times in an hour? And then finally you got the call.
The seller accepted.
The seller accepted. You are ecstatic. You're ready to pop the champagne. You are, mentally placing your furniture in the living room.
And
then your real estate agent gives you that look. The one, put the cork back in the bottle look.
Yeah.
Because you are not done. You're not even close.
Not at all.
Now, a total stranger has to drive by the house, walk through the bedrooms, look at the furnace, peek in the attic, and tell the bank if the number you just agreed to pay, with your own money, by the way, is actually real.
The appraisal. It's the single most terrifying limbo, I think, in the entire real estate process. It's that silence before the potential storm.
It is the ultimate waiting game. And I think for most of us, this person, the appraiser, is, they're viewed as a villain. Or at best, maybe a soulless bureaucrat standing between us and our keys.
Right, just a hurdle.
A hurdle, a rubber stamp we have to pay $500 for just to get the mortgage approved.
Yeah.
But today, we're going to completely flip that script.
There we are.
We have a massive stack of research here. We're talking global appraisal standards, deep dives into Wikipedia's methodology archives, the RICS Red Book from the UK, and some really heavy 2025 industry reports about AI and algorithmic bias.
And what's wild is that when you start to peel back all these layers, appraisal isn't just checking boxes on a form. It's this incredibly complex intersection of, I'd say, art, hardcore science, and behavioral economics.
It basically determines the value of the biggest asset class on the planet.
Pretty much, yeah.
So that is the mission today. We are decoding the invisible hand. We are going to figure out how these people put a price tag on a dream. And if there's one single theme that just jumps out from all these documents, it's a phrase that sounds like a Zen koan.
The price is not the value.
The price is not the value. I love that. It sounds like something a monk would say on a mountaintop, right? But here, it's just pure economic. So let's unpack this immediately, because this feels really counterintuitive.
It does.
If I write a check for $500,000 for a house, and the seller cashes that check, isn't the value of the house $500,000?
Strictly speaking, no, that is the price. In all the professional literature, price is defined as a historical fact. It is a piece of hard data. It represents the amount that a specific buyer agreed to pay a specific seller at a very specific moment in time.
It's done. It's in the past.
It's history. It's a receipt. That's all it is.
Okay, so price is a fact. It's what happened. So then what on earth is value?
Market value is an opinion. It's a prophecy. Almost. It is an estimate of what the property should exchange for in a transaction, but assuming a very, very specific set of criteria are met.
Criteria like what?
Well, the industry standard usually relies on a concept that economists call the Walrasian auction.
The Walrasian auction. Okay, I saw this in the notes and I felt like I was back in Econ 101. This is the theoretical perfect market, right? Where everything is known and everyone is rational.
Exactly. Leon Walras was this 19th century economist who imagined a system where an auctioneer calls out prices and everything just clears perfectly. There are no secrets, no hidden information.
A fantasy land, basically.
It's a total thought experiment. So market value assumes a world where you have a willing buyer and a willing seller. And crucially, neither of them is under any kind of duress.
So nobody's being transferred for work next week and has to sell their house by Friday.
Exactly. Or nobody's going through a messy divorce and just needs cash now. And, this is key, both parties are fully knowledgeable about the asset and they're acting in their own best interests.
That's what they call an arm's length transaction.
That's the one.
It's a legal term I see everywhere. It essentially means I'm not buying the house from my father for $1. Correct.
Right. And that's the most obvious example. If you buy the house from your dad for $1, the price is $1. That is a historical fact. But the market value might be, $400,000.
And if an appraiser used my $1 purchase as a benchmark, a comp,
They'd be breaking the market, they would be using fundamentally bad data, and their license would be at risk. But it gets so much more subtle than that. Price and value diverge constantly because, well, human beings are not rational actors.
we are definitely not rational. I bought a blender last week just because it looked cool on Instagram. I didn't even check to see if it actually blends things well.
Exactly. Now just scale that up to a $500,000 purchase.
Oh, boy.
Take the classic example of the uninformed buyer. Let's say someone is moving to a new city. They're wealthy, they're in a rush, maybe they're relocating for some high-pressure job.
Right.
They don't know the local nuances. They don't realize that the school district lines were just redrawn last month, and this beautiful house they've fallen in love with is now in the bad zone, so to speak.
So they don't have that local knowledge.
None at all. And they end up paying $50,000 over what any of the locals would have paid for that same house.
So in doing that, they've set a new price record for the street.
They have.
Yeah.
That extra $50,000, that is part of the market price. It happened. But it is absolutely not market value. It's an anomaly. It's an outlier based on imperfect information.
So the appraiser is basically a referee. They're blowing the whistle on bad decisions. They look at that sale and say, nope, that one doesn't count for my analysis.
Or at least they have to heavily discount it or explain why it's an outlier. Or they blow the whistle on unique motivations. And this brings us to the special interest scenario, which I find fascinating.
Okay.
Imagine you own a nice house on a large lot, and the empty, undeveloped lot right next door comes up for sale.
Right.
Now, to a random developer, that lot is worth maybe $100,000. They can build one small house on it, sell it, make a profit. Standard stuff.
Standard market price. Makes sense.
But to you live right next door. If you buy that lot, you can tear down the fence, combine it with your current property, and suddenly you have a massive estate.
Oh, I see where this is going.
You can build a tennis court, a guest house, a sprawling garden. The utility of that piece of land is higher for you than for anyone else on the planet.
I'm not just buying dirt. I'm buying the expansion of my kingdom. I'm protecting my privacy.
Precisely. In appraisal terms, this process is called assemblage. And the resulting increase in value from combining the parcels is called plottage value.
Plottage value.
So you might be willing to pay, say, $150,000 for that lot.
Way more than the developer would.
Exactly. That 150 figure, that's the investment value to you specifically. But the market value is still only $100,000. If you pay $150, you're paying a premium for your specific unique use case.
That's a really crucial distinction, investment value versus market value. It reminds me a lot of corporate mergers and acquisitions.
How so?
When a tech giant buys a little startup, they pay a massive premium. They aren't just paying what the stock is trading at. They're paying for the synergy, or to eliminate a competitor, or for the engineering talent. They're paying for control.
The sum is greater than the parts.
Exactly.
That is the perfect analogy. And real estate works the exact same way. And we have to be really clear about these different types of value because different clients need different answers from the appraiser. For example, there's value in use.
Value in use. Okay, give me an example of that.
Sure. Think of a factory that is custom built to manufacture a very specific, very weird component for a satellite.
Okay, super specialized building.
Extremely. The ceilings are a specific height to accommodate a crane. The floors are reinforced concrete for heavy machinery. The power supply is industrial grade. To the satellite company that owns it, that building is worth millions. It is perfectly designed for their use.
The net present value of the cash flow they can generate there is huge.
It's massive. But what happens if they go out of business and have to put it on the market?
Well, the general market just sees a weird, overbuilt, expensive warehouse.
Right. What's a real estate developer going to do with that? The market value might be half of the value in use. If the appraiser doesn't clarify in their scope of work which value they are supposed to be calculating, they're going to get the wrong number for their client.
And then there's the scary one, liquidation value. Just the name sounds bad.
It is. This is the fire sale scenario. Market value, remember, assumes a reasonable exposure time on the market.
Meaning the house sits on Zillow for a normal amount of time, say 60 to 90 days, so the right buyers can find it.
Exactly. But if a bank is foreclosing on a property and says, we need cash in 20 days, you are not going to get market value. You are getting liquidation value.
Which is always lower because you're trading price for speed.
Yeah.
You don't have time to find that perfect buyer.
That's it. And one more we absolutely have to mention because it confuses homeowners constantly. Insurable value.
Oh, yes. This is when you get your appraisal back, and the number's totally different from what your insurance agent says the house is worth, and you immediately panic.
It happens all the time. People think someone is wrong or someone is cheating them, but they're just measuring two different things. Insurable value is usually based on the replacement cost.
Okay, what's that?
It's literally the cost of the bricks, the sticks, the labor, and the copper wire to rebuild the house from scratch if it burns to the ground. Crucially, it often excludes the land value entirely.
Because the dirt doesn't burn.
Exactly. You don't need to insure the earth. So if you live in a tiny shack on the beach in Malibu, your market value might be $5 million because of the ocean view and the value of that land.
The location.
But your insurable value might only be $200,000 because the shack itself is cheap to rebuild. If you confuse those two numbers, you're either going to be way overinsured or, worse, dangerously underinsured.
Okay, so we've established that value is this nebulous shifting concept depending on the context. Are you an insurer, a desperate seller, a neighbor building an empire?
Right.
But the appraiser can't just, vibe it out. They can't just walk in, lick your finger, stick it in the air and say, yeah, feels like $1 million to me.
No, that would be malpractice, and it would get them sued very quickly.
They have to show their work. The research we looked at mentions the 3 pillars or the 3 main approaches to value. And I want to walk through these because this is where the science actually happens. This isn't just guesswork.
These are the 3 tools in the toolbox. And depending on the scope of work, which we'll get to later, the appraiser will pick the best tool for the job. Sometimes they use all 3 and then have to reconcile the different results.
Let's start with the one that most listeners are probably going to recognize, the residential standard. The sales comparison approach.
This is the bread and butter of home buying. If you're buying a standard single-family home in a subdivision, this is 99% of the valuation.
And it's based on a really simple economic idea, right?
It is. It's called the principle of substitution.
Which states?
A rational person will not pay more for a property than it would cost to acquire a similar, equally desirable substitute property. It's just logic. Why would I pay $500,000 for your house if I can buy the exact same house next door for $450,000?
But there's the problem. No 2 houses are exactly alike. Even in those cookie-cutter subdivisions, one has a better view, one is on a cul-de-sac, one has a new kitchen, one smells like wet dog.
Right.
How do they compare apples to oranges?
They turn the oranges into apples through a process called adjustment. This is where the art really meets the math. The appraiser finds comparables, or comps.
Okay.
And this is important. These must be sold properties. We cannot use asking prices.
Because asking prices are basically wishes. I can ask $1 million for my shed in the backyard. Doesn't mean I'll get it.
Exactly. Asking prices are fantasy. Sold prices are reality. So the appraiser finds 3 to 5 recent sales in the nearby area. Now let's do a quick simulation. Let's say the subject property, that's the house you want to buy, has a swimming pool.
Okay, I'm buying a house with a pool. I am officially living the dream.
So the appraiser finds a comp down the street that is almost identical. Same square footage, same age, same number of beds and baths. It's sold for $400,000. But it doesn't have a pool.
Okay, so that house is inferior to mine in appraisal terms.
Correct. So now the appraiser has to answer the question, what would that comp have sold for if it had a pool?
So they have to add value to it.
Right. They adjust up. They add the contributory value of the pool to the comp's price.
Now, wait a second. Is that just the cost of the pool? If it cost me $50,000 to install the pool, do they just add $50,000?
No. And this is the single biggest point of confusion for homeowners. Cost does not equal value. In many markets, a pool might cost $50,000 to build, but buyers in that area might only be willing to pay an extra $20,000 for a house that has one. In that case, the adjustment is only $20,000.
That is so painful for the seller who just put the pool in. They literally lost $30,000 the second the water was put in.
It happens all the time. Overimprovement is a huge financial risk. Conversely, if the comp has a brand new finished basement and your subject property doesn't, the comp is superior.
Okay.
So you have to adjust down. You subtract the value of that finished basement from the comp's price. The goal is to mathematically alter all the comps until they all look like your subject property.
And then you see what price they all point to.
Exactly. You end up with a range of adjusted values, and the appraiser reconciles them into a final opinion of value.
I saw a stat in the notes that really, really blew my mind regarding these adjustments. Tree value. It says mature landscaping can contribute up to 27% of a property's value. This seems insane.
It is huge, and it's one of the most overlooked aspects of value. We aren't talking about, some petunias in a flower pot. We are talking about mature oaks, maples, an established canopy over the house.
What's the logic there?
It signals stability, privacy, curb appeal. It provides shade, which lowers energy costs. It just creates an aesthetic that people subconsciously will pay a huge premium for. It takes decades to grow that.
So how on earth do they determine that number? How do you isolate the price of a single tree?
It's a technique called paired sales analysis. It's basically a form of regression analysis. If you look at enough data in a large neighborhood, you can eventually find two houses that are almost identical in every way. Same builder, same year, same floor plan, except one has a barren lawn and the other has a beautiful 50-year-old oak tree in the front yard.
And you just see what the difference in sale price was.
Exactly. If the house with the tree sold for $15,000 more, all other things being equal, you now have a data-backed adjustment for a mature tree.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
So the big takeaway there for homeowners is do not cut down the big oak tree in the front yard if you're planning to sell. You're literally sawing off your equity.
Please do not keep the tree.
Okay, so that's sales comparison. It works great when there are lots of similar houses. But what if there aren't? What if I'm buying a brand new church or a marina
Or
a public library? You can't exactly look for sold libraries down the street to compare it to.
Oh, you definitely can't. And that is when we pull out tool number 2, the cost approach. This was historically called the summation method.
Summation. So we're just adding things up.
Essentially, yes. The formula is actually quite simple on the surface. You calculate the value of the land as if it were empty and available. Then you add the cost to build the building new today. And then, and this is the key, you subtract depreciation.
So what is the dirt worth, plus what does it cost to build the structure, minus how much has it fallen apart over time?
Precisely. But in appraisal, depreciation isn't just about things getting old and rusty. It's a much more nuanced concept. There are 3 distinct types of obsolescence that we look for.
Okay, lay them on me.
The first one is the easiest to understand. It's physical obsolescence. That's the straightforward stuff. The roof is leaking, the carpet is worn out, the boiler is from 1950 and sounds like a dying whale. The building is physically breaking down.
Simple enough. Just normal wear and tear.
Then you have functional obsolescence. This is a bit trickier. This is when the building works physically, the walls are sturdy, the roof is tight, but the design is bad. It's out of step with what the modern market wants.
And the notes had a hilarious example of this. The house with 2 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms.
The classic super adequacy house, yes. Technically, those 9 bathrooms cost an absolute fortune to build. The plumbing, the tile, the fixtures. It might have cost $200,000 just for the bathrooms alone.
So from a cost perspective, it's a huge number.
Huge. But if you try to sell that house, no buyer's going to pay extra for 9 bathrooms. In fact, they might pay less because now they're thinking about the nightmare of cleaning 9 toilets every week.
So the extra bathrooms, which cost a fortune, actually have negative value in the market.
Or at best, 0 value. That is functional obsolescence. You overbuilt for the market. Another great example is a 5-bedroom house where you have to walk through one bedroom to get to another. Technically, it's 5 bedrooms, but functionally, it's a disaster.
That's a bad design. I get it. Okay, and the third type of obsolescence.
The third type is the most painful because you absolutely cannot fix it. External obsolescence.
This is the location problem, isn't it?
It is. Let's say you build a perfect mansion. Best materials, great design, everything is top-notch. But then, a year after you move in, the city builds a noisy 6-lane highway right behind your backyard.
Oh, that's my nightmare.
Or a rendering plant opens up downwind. Or the main employer in town closes and property values tank across the city.
You can't fix the highway. You can't fix the economy.
You cannot. Your property has lost value purely due to factors outside your property lines. And the cost approach has to account for that loss. It's brutal because it's completely out of your control.
So that's the cost approach. Really useful for unique special use properties. Now for the third pillar, the one the Wall Street guys love, the income approach.
Yes, this is for the office towers, the apartment complexes, the shopping malls. If you're buying these types of properties, you don't care about the wallpaper or the view or the oak tree nearly as much as you care about one thing.
Show me the money.
The cash flow, exactly. The value is a direct function of the net operating income, or NOI. They use a tool called a cap rate, a capitalization rate, to determine the value.
I hear cap rate thrown around at cocktail parties by people trying to sound smart about real estate. What is it, really, in simple terms?
In the simplest terms, it's a measure of risk and return. It's the rate of return you would expect to get on the property if you bought it all in cash. If a building costs $1 million and generates $100,000 a year in profit after expenses, that's a 10% cap rate.
Okay, so if I'm an investor, do I want a high cap rate or a low cap rate?
If you are buying, you want a high cap rate. You want more income for your price. If you are selling, you want a low cap rate. A low cap rate means the market is willing to pay a very high price for that income stream. It's a seesaw.
And can we touch on this idea of froth? The notes mentioned this specifically in the context of the UK commercial market. It sounds like a term for my morning latte, but I suspect it's not.
No, not quite. In the UK specifically, appraisers, or surveyors as they're called, they look at the estimated rental value, or ERV. That's what the property should be renting for based on the current market.
Right.
And then they compare that to the actual income it's currently generating. Sometimes a building has a tenant who is paying way, way above the market rate. Maybe they signed a 10-year lease 5 years ago when prices were crazy.
So they're locked into a great deal for the landlord.
A fantastic deal.
Mm.
But that extra income, the slice of rent that is above the current market rate, is called froth. It's precarious. It's not sustainable.
Because when that lease expires,
the income will drop back down to the market level. So appraisers have to heavily discount that froth. It's a very descriptive way of saying, this income stream is a bit bubbly. Don't trust it long term.
I love that. Be careful. That revenue stream is just froth. It's so visual. So, okay, we have the three pillars. Sales comparison for regular houses, the cost approach for unique buildings, and the income approach for investments.
The three-legged stool evaluation.
But this deep dive took us on a bit of a world tour. And I was really surprised to learn that value isn't calculated the same way everywhere. It's not a universal constant.
Not at all. Culture and legal systems play a huge role in the methodology.
Let's talk about Germany. Because their system seems, well, it seems incredibly German. Very structured, very precise, very philosophical even.
It is completely distinct. In Germany, they have a core philosophy known as the separation of earth and stone.
Earth and stone. It sounds like a fantasy novel. Or a heavy metal band.
It does, but the logic behind it is extremely practical. They treat the land and the improvements, the buildings, as completely separate assets to be valued independently.
Why?
The idea is that the land is eternal. It will be there forever. The building, however, has a limited lifespan. It will eventually crumble or be torn down.
That's a very long-term view.
Yeah.
In the U.S., we just say house plus land equals one price. We treat it all as one big bundle.
Right. But in Germany, to value them separately, they have these incredible local committees called the Gutachterausschuss. Gutachterausschuss. They're appraisal committees. And here's the amazing part. Every single time a property is sold in Germany, the contract must by law be sent to this committee. They gather data on every single sale to create a purchase price database.
So they have perfect or near perfect data transparency.
Better than almost anywhere else in the world. And using this incredibly rich data, they calculate a specific interest rate for land use called the Liegenschaftszins.
Okay, what's that?
It's conceptually the interest paid by the building owner to the landowner, even if they're the same person. It's a way to mathematically isolate the value of the dirt versus the value of the structure with incredible precision.
That is so different from the U.S. approach. It feels more scientific. Less Wild West.
It is. It's designed to eliminate a lot of the guesswork that can happen in other systems.
Okay, now let's hop over the channel to the UK. The Red Book. What's that about?
The RICS Red Book, it's the Bible essentially for chartered surveyors in the UK and much the Commonwealth. It sets out all the mandatory practices and ethical standards.
And what really stood out to me about the UK system was the traffic light concept in their surveys. It feels very consumer-friendly.
It is. In the UK, when you commission a survey, specifically the RICS Homebuyer Report, the surveyor will rate the condition of different parts of the house using a traffic light system. Condition rating 1 is green, meaning it's good. 2 is amber, meaning it needs attention soon. And 3 is red.
If the roof is red, fix it or it collapses.
Exactly. Needs urgent attention now. But there is a massive trap for buyers in the UK that we need to highlight. This is a public service announcement for anyone listening who's buying property there.
The mortgage valuation versus the survey.
Yes, this is absolutely crucial. When your bank orders a valuation in the UK, it is for the bank. It is solely to answer one question. Is this house safe collateral for our loan? It is not a structural survey for you, the buyer.
So the surveyor might see a huge problem, like faulty wiring, but if it doesn't affect the bank's security on the loan, they might not even mention it to you.
Worse, the surveyor will often include a legal disclaimer in that report stating they have no liability whatsoever to the borrower. So if you buy a house based on the bank's valuation and the walls fall down a month later, you have no recourse. You can't sue the surveyor.
Because you weren't their client.
You weren't the client. You should have gotten your own building survey or homebuyer report.
That is a huge distinction.
Well,
Listener, if you are buying in the UK, get your own survey. Do not rely on the bank's quick glance.
it's a classic case of knowing who the client is and what the scope of work is. The bank is the client, not you.
Now, let's go even further east and look at Russia. This was a fascinating history lesson in the source material, because for a very long time, there was no such thing as market value in Russia.
Right. Under the Soviet Union, the state set the prices for everything. There was no market. Everything was owned by the state. So when the 90s hit and privatization began, the entire profession of appraisal had to be invented from scratch almost overnight.
That must have just been absolute chaos.
It was the Wild West. You moved from statutory price setting to a free-for-all market profession instantly. By the 2000s, you had the big four international consulting firms handling the high-end commercial appraisals, but you also had thousands and thousands of independent valuers popping up everywhere. And the quality, well, it varied dramatically.
And then came the crackdown in 2017.
The qualifying exam. The government decided there was too much malpractice, too much variance, too much corruption. So they instituted a new, mandatory, and incredibly difficult certification exam.
And the notes say it was difficult.
Difficult is an understatement. The predictions at the time said it would decimate the profession. They expected the number of active valuers to drop from thousands down to maybe just 2,000 or 3,000 for the entire country.
Wow.
Imagine if 80% of the doctors in a country suddenly lost their license because the board exam got too hard overnight. That's basically what happened to Russian appraisal. It was a forced, brutal consolidation of the industry to try and purge the incompetence.
Talk about raising the barrier to entry. Okay, so we've done the history, we've done the global tour. Now I want to look forward. The source material talks a lot about the 2025 landscape. We are living in a time of massive change for this industry.
We really are. The days of the clipboard and the tape measure and the Polaroid camera are fading fast.
First, let's talk about the forms.
Yeah.
The UA and URR, which sounds like alphabet soup, but the notes say it really matters.
It does. For decades, appraisers in the U.S. used these static, rigid forms. It was like filling out a tax return from the 1980s. Box 1, Box 2, Box 3. But the 2025 overhaul that's underway is moving toward dynamic reporting.
What does that mean?
The report itself adapts to the property. It allows for more data, more photos, more storytelling, more nuance. It's a move away from just checking boxes and toward explaining value.
But the biggest change, and the one that scares a lot of people in the industry, is the rise of the machines, AVMs, automated valuation models.
This is the Zillow's estimate on steroids. We're talking about incredibly powerful regression analysis and machine learning algorithms that can crunch millions of data points in seconds to spit out a value.
It sounds great on paper. It's fast, it's cheap, there's no human error or bias. Why pay a human $500 when a bot can do it for free in 2 seconds?
Well, it is great for a certain type of property, for cookie-cutter homes. If you live in a subdivision in Phoenix where every house was built in 2015 and they all have the same 3 floor plans, a computer can value that perfectly. It has enough clean data points to be incredibly accurate.
There's always a but.
But computers can't smell.
You can't smell? What do you mean?
An AVM cannot walk into a house and smell the cat urine that's embedded deep in the carpets and the subfloor. It can't see that the layout is incredibly awkward and you have to walk through a bedroom to get to the kitchen.
Right.
It can't feel that the neighborhood vibe has shifted because a trendy new coffee shop just opened up, or conversely, that a gang has moved in down the street, all those qualitative things.
Right. The computer sees 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1,500 square feet. It doesn't see 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a meth lab operating next door.
Exactly. AVMs struggle with nonconformity. Rural areas are a nightmare for AVMs because there just isn't enough sales data. Unique homes, like a converted barn or a historic Victorian with tons of character, they completely confuse the algorithms.
They need patterns.
They need patterns, and real estate is often very messy and unpatterned.
So the human appraiser is still safe for now, at least for the weird stuff.
For the weird stuff, yes. But the human element brings its own set of very serious problems, and this is the heavy part of our deep dive. We have to talk about racial bias.
Yeah. The source material references studies from Freddie Mac and other major institutions they're pretty damning. This isn't just anecdotes anymore.
No, the data is becoming very, very difficult to ignore. Recent studies show that traditional modeling simply cannot explain the valuation gap for minority-owned homes.
Huh.
Even when you control for every conceivable variable, income, credit score, house size, condition, age of the homes in majority Black or Latino neighborhoods are consistently valued lower than similar homes in white neighborhoods.
And the debate, as I understand it from the reading, is really about where that bias comes from. Is it the individual appraiser being consciously or unconsciously racist? Or is it the data itself that's the problem?
It's the chicken or the egg problem of systemic inequality. Some argue that appraisers are merely recording the bias that already exists in the market. If society as a whole is willing to pay less for a house in a certain neighborhood, then the appraiser's job is to reflect that reality. They use neighborhood quality as a proxy for value.
But neighborhood quality can be a code word for other things.
It can be, and it's often a direct byproduct of historical redlining. If a neighborhood was literally drawn on a map in Reading in the 1930s and labeled hazardous for lending, often because of its racial makeup,
It received less investment for decades.
decades of disinvestment, values stayed low. So when an appraiser today pulls comps from that neighborhood, those comps are inherently low. The appraiser can say, hey, I'm just using the data, but the data itself is poisoned by history.
So the appraisal perpetuates the past. It locks in those historical inequalities.
Precisely. And that is the huge challenge for 2025 and beyond. How do you break that cycle? Can you appraise a house based only on its physical attributes, irrespective of its neighborhood? But if you do that, are you ignoring the economic reality of location? It is a massive ethical and economic knot that the entire industry is trying to untangle right now.
It really makes you realize that these numbers aren't just math. They're sociology. They are history. They are policy.
They absolutely are, and they have very real-world consequences for generational wealth generation.
Okay, let's pivot for a moment to some practical takeaways. I'm a listener. I'm in the process of buying a house, or maybe I'm refinancing. What do I really need to know from all this? First off, the inspection myth.
Oh, this is a big one. Please, listener, hear this. An appraiser is not a home inspector.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
They are not the same person. An appraiser spends maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour at the property. They are looking at value, at the layout, the general condition. They are not climbing up into the attic to check the depth of the insulation. They are not testing every electrical outlet. They are not running a camera down the sewer line.
So if the appraisal comes back and says value is good, that does not mean this house is not going to fall down.
Correct. But here's a pro tip. If you get a home inspection before the appraisal, which is rare, but it is possible, or if you have a prior inspection report from the seller that shows defects, give that report to the appraiser.
Really, why would I want to show them the problems? Wouldn't that just lower the value?
It might, but if you are the buyer, you want the appraisal to reflect reality. If the foundation is cracked and needs $30,000 in repairs, the value of the home should be lower.
Got it.
If you give that professional report to the appraiser, they must factor it into their analysis. It forces them to acknowledge the defect in a data-driven way. This can save you from overpaying for a lemon or give you leverage to go back and renegotiate with the seller.
That is a great tip. Collaborate with your appraisers. Don't hide things from them.
And the final practical concept we should cover is the scope of work. This comes from US PAY, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. It's the rule book.
The rule book.
The rule book. In 2006, they changed the rules to say that an appraiser must define the scope of work for an assignment before they even start. Who is the client? What is the intended use? What is the specific definition of value being used?
Why does this matter to me, the regular homeowner?
Because you can't just take an appraisal that was ordered for a tax appeal and then try to use it to get a mortgage. The scope is totally different. The definition of value might be slightly different. If you hire an appraiser for a divorce settlement, the scope might be to find the value as of a specific date in the past, say the date of separation. That number is completely useless for a bank making a loan today.
Context is king. You have to know what question you are asking the appraiser to answer before they start.
Exactly. An appraisal without a clearly defined scope of work is like a map without a legend or a scale. It's just lines and numbers that don't mean anything. You need the key to be able to read it properly.
Wow. So let's try to recap. We've gone from the pure anxiety of that waiting game after you make an offer, through the complex math of substitution and the 9-bathroom house.
Yes.
We've traveled to Germany's earth and stone philosophy, the UK's traffic light system, and we've landed in the AI-driven, ethically complex landscape of 2025.
It's a very long journey for a single number on a page.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the biggest takeaway from all this is that real estate appraisal isn't just a hurdle you have to clear. It's the mechanism we as a society use to try and put a static, rational number on something that is fundamentally fluid, emotional, and deeply, deeply human. Shelter.
That's the core tension of the whole profession. We're trying to quantify the unquantifiable. A home is where your kids grew up, its memories, its safety, its status. But the bank needs a number, the tax assessor needs a number, the court needs a number. The appraiser is the translator between those two worlds.
And as we look at the future, with AI and AVM taking a bigger and bigger role, it raises a really provocative final thought for me. And I want to leave the listener with this to mull over.
Go for it.
We talked about how these AVMs, these AI models, rely entirely on past data. And we talked about how that past data contains the ghosts of our history, things like redlining and systemic bias. So if we hand the keys over to the algorithms entirely, if we let the robots decide what our homes are worth based purely on what's happened in the past, will we ever actually be able to fix the unfairness?
Or do we just crystallize it?
Or will the AI just crystallize the prejudices of the past and lock them in forever with the illusion of mathematical objectivity?
That is the great danger. If the input data is biased, the output will be biased. And the machine doesn't have a conscience to question its own answer.
Something to think about the next time you check your Zestimate. Look at your own home, not just as a place to live, but as a bundle of rights, a bundle of values, and a bundle of history just waiting to be decoded. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Until next time.